what do you think all of this could mean to Donald Trump's political and personal future? Well, for that, I go to Richard Donoghue. He is the former acting Deputy Attorney General of the United States during the Trump administration. He is also the former U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York. So you wear a lot of hats, and they're all completely apropos, Mr. Donoghue. Let me just start with some of the most recent news that broke today. I want to get your thoughts on it, whether you think it's connected at all. But Congressman Scott Perry, who is a Trump loyalist who asked for a pardon after the riots, basically announced that he was asked by the FBI for his phone, that it was confiscated. Let me read what he said, Mr. Donoghue. He said, "This morning while traveling with my family, 3 FBI agents visited me and seized my cell phone. They made no attempt to contact my lawyer, who would have made arrangements for them to have my phone if that was their wish. I'm outraged, though not surprised, that the FBI, under the direction of Merrick Garland's DOJ, would seize the phone of a sitting member of Congress. My phone contains information about my legislative and political activities and personal private discussions with my wife, family, constituents, and friends. None of this is the government's business." Sir, your thoughts about that seizure, and if you think it's connected at all to what we've been witnessing over the last 30 hours or so?
Yes, Ashleigh, I certainly do think these things are connected. This is not happened in isolation. The fact that we have 2 search warrants executed in less than 24 hours now that relate to these individuals certainly seems to be connected. And, you said at the outset that they asked for the phone. That's a very polite way of saying that they executed a search warrant and took the phone from him, and will be in the process of searching it probably as we speak.
Do you put some of those pieces together and start to see more clarity in perhaps what the agents might have listed out on that request for the warrant that, a federal magistrate signed? And I don't know if you've ever heard of U.S. Magistrate Judge Bruce Reinhart, but he was appointed in 2018, and much of the reporting suggests that he signed 2 warrants on that day that are unsealed, and it's looking like he might be the judge that signed those warrants. And if that's the case, that's an appointee under the Trump administration. But are you putting these pieces together and starting to get an idea of what might be going on?
Well, there are certainly still a lot of pieces to this puzzle to be placed down, but we are seeing them come together one by one. If I were part of the former president's legal team, I would certainly be concerned about these developments. We don't know what they mean exactly. The magistrate judges who sign these warrants in any district in the country, certainly in Florida, are judges who are actually hired by the court. So they're not Trump appointees necessarily. Even if they were appointed during the Trump administration, they were not put up by the president and confirmed by the Senate the way a district court judge would. But they do look at the evidence that's brought before them. They make a determination as to whether there's probable cause to support the warrant. And if so, they do issue them. But it is interesting to see that they had been issued at the same time, perhaps by the same judge. And, we really won't know the full story about these warrants and what the purpose of these searches may be until we see the affidavits, and those will remain under seal. I'm not surprised if media outlets and others are trying to get them unsealed. The government will make the argument that they should remain under seal because it will compromise an ongoing investigation. So they will eventually see the light of day, and then we'll have a much better idea what's going on. But we can see the puzzle pieces coming into play here.
Well, I can't wait for that day. Well, we'll see the light. But in the meantime, the crimes, if that's what we're talking about at this point, and that certainly would be the reason that the FBI would have a search and seizure warrant like this, that does not match. I mean, quite frankly, it just doesn't match this unprecedented tactic, right? So from your inside look at the Department of Justice, lots of Republicans are saying this is just a sham and it's political, and lots of Democrats are saying, oh, they have the goods. Is there any gray line in between, or do you see it one way or the other?
No, I think there's a great deal of gray, and I think there will be for some time. Normally when you see search warrants executed, you would expect charges to follow, but it doesn't mean that the charges would follow directed at the person who happened to have possession of the evidence that was seized. So the fact that there was a search at Mar-a-Lago is certainly interesting. It is, as you said, unprecedented, which is probably the word we've heard more than any other over the last 24 hours, because that's exactly what it is. But it doesn't necessarily mean that any charges that might flow from this will be directed at the president. But if I were part of that circle of people who were around the president at the end of the last administration, I would certainly be concerned tonight.
And perhaps that's not why we're hearing, not much from the president. Perhaps he's busy with his legal advisors. One last quick sort of order of business, if I can, just because I'm really curious about the process. I was assuming that there would have been, two people paired together doing this kind of a search at the president's home. We usually have special masters that are really, really careful at separating privileged material from potential evidence, right? And I have heard that there are so-called taint teams. I'd never heard of it before, but taint teams that went through on this search, this raid, however you politically want to call it. Can you tell me how that would work? Would they gather it all up and then sit down and actually make an office in that location to separate out what's privileged, what isn't? Or would they gather it all up, take it back to the FBI headquarters and have the taint teams work there to make sure that privileged information isn't just sort of getting eyeballs like mad all over it?
Right. So the taint team would work off-site. Typically what you do is you take possession of the materials that are described in the warrant. Here, this warrant probably is shaped by the background conversations and discussions that have been had over the last few months between the president's legal team and the government, the Justice Department in this case. So I think they probably had a pretty good idea that the records that they were looking for were in a particular room in Mar-a-Lago. And there's been some reporting that actually government agents have gone to that room previously to basically look at it and see whether it was secure in their view. So I don't think they were looking for long. I think they knew exactly where they were going. They knew exactly what boxes they were going to seize. They removed them probably fairly quickly from the residence, would have taken them back to either the FBI field office there nearby or another location. And then the taint team would go through them in the first instance to try to separate out any privileged material that might be in there and then pass the relevant non-privileged material along to the investigators.
Because I can see a big fight brewing over that as well. Richard Donoghue, so good of you to join me. Oh, I will there. It's an understatement. Former acting deputy attorney general joining me live tonight. Thank you, Mr. Donoghue. Appreciate it. I want to also bring in two other people who know a lot about the cross-section of criminal investigations and politics. Tara Setmeyer is a former Republican communications director. She's a senior advisor to the Lincoln Project and a resident scholar at UVA's Center for Politics. And Dan Eckert is an attorney. He's also a former federal prosecutor and a former federal agent. It's a lot of F's, but that's good because you guys are pretty smart. So, Dan, I'm going to begin with you. There's been a lot of call for the Senate Judiciary Committee or the Senate Intel Committee to have the information that the FBI has. Lots of demands, right? You need to share this. We need to have transparency on what the FBI is doing there. Do you think that can possibly happen?
Well, I think it's kind of early to make that call. You just had a search warrant executed within the last, several hours, and I think the precedent for DOJ is going to be whatever the criminal investigation is. And I would hope that they would further the criminal investigation first. And I'm not saying that they would preclude the congressional investigators from looking at these documents at some point. But my take would be that they're going to go through the criminal process methodically, and just like Mr. Donoghue said, there's going to be a filter team looking for privileged documents, making sure that nothing gets in front of those FBI agents that shouldn't be.
So, Tara, the Democrats kind of went bananas yesterday when everybody started reading U.S. code, which is usually boring television, but yesterday it wasn't, effectively saying that, violating the statute of improper handling of government records is, quote, you're disqualified from holding any office under the United States. There are lots of gradations of that, but do you think it is at all possible that the DOJ, the AG, the FBI were all, working together based on a lark, based on maybe we'll be able to sway some public opinion out there if we just have, people at the FBI go through the president's home? Or do you think that would be, madness, as many of the Democrats say?
Yeah, I think that there was nothing political about this at all. Many people have been complaining that Merrick Garland was not working quick enough, that he was taking too long, moving at a glacial pace. What was he doing? And we're demanding that he finally do something. Well, it's clear that this entire time that the DOJ has been working on several cases. We know that there are several grand juries that have been impaneled. And this seems to be something, from what we understand, we still don't know for sure because we have not not seen the affidavits for the warrant, but it looks as though it has to do with the mishandling of classified information. This is a serious crime. And the idea of Donald Trump not being disqualified from office if he were in fact indicted and convicted of this is a compelling one, but it's some argue that it doesn't hold up to constitutional muster because the Constitution dictates who's eligible for the presidency, not Congress. So I think it's interesting to go down that path. But the idea here that the DOJ has somehow been politically weaponized, I think is absurd. We saw that during the Trump administration. We are not seeing that now. If anyone knows anything about the FBI,
I did hear from some high-ranking, former FBI officials that they believe that the FBI has become entirely political. They believe that the AG has become political, that the DOJ is political. And Dan, you're a former federal agent. You've worked, in the federal ranks. Do you think that? Are there equally a number of officials, who don't believe that?
Well, one thing I'll share with you, and I've said this before, I can honestly tell you when I was a federal prosecutor, 10 years, I had no idea, honestly, what anybody's political parties were, persuasions, any of that. And I had cases all over the country, traveled, throughout the world during investigations. So it's not anything that I, ever experienced. And now in my practice, I'm a federal defense attorney. I don't see that, but I'm not handling cases out of Washington, D.C. that are of this magnitude. I mean, I've had defendants that were involved in the Capitol disturbance, and I've got somebody else that I'm going to talk to next week. Those cases, I think, are of a different, of a different nature because of some of the cases that I've handled are people that were trespassers. I mean, they weren't people that were violent, didn't destroy property, didn't hurt cops, and those types of things. So you start to see a little bit of treatment for somebody that walked into the Capitol building for 8 minutes and walked out, looking at jail time, which is that's not something I've ever experienced before in my career.
And it's not the last we're going to talk about this. Tara Setmeyer, Dan Eckhart, thank you both. Appreciate your perspective and look forward to having you back. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.